picture this. It's the holidays, December 15th, 2005.
Okay.
A mother and son are driving to a Christmas party, you know, all ready to celebrate with friends and colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
But as they drive, there's this unease. You know, the son can't get a hold of his girlfriend.
Wow.
No answer to his calls. No replies to his texts.
Wow.
And what started as, a festive evening slowly becomes this frantic search,
Yeah.
ending in a discovery that will change their lives forever and leave this small town, grappling with a mystery for years to come.
This is the story of Nona Dirksmeyer,
Yeah.
a young woman whose life was tragically cut short in her Russellville, Arkansas apartment.
Right.
Her case is full of twists and turns and conflicting accounts.
Oh, wow.
And it captivated the state. It went through not one, but 3 trials.
3 trials.
Yeah.
We're going to dive deep into those trials.
Yes.
We'll examine the evidence and the conflicting theories,
Great.
and we'll look at the impact this case had on everyone involved.
Absolutely.
We'll explore the lives of Nona and her boyfriend, Kevin Jones, who quickly became the prime suspect.
Yeah, it's important to note right from the start, this case is more than just a whodunit.
Right.
It's a story about human relationships, the weight of circumstantial evidence, and the power of public perception.
Especially in a close-knit community.
Exactly.
To understand this case, we need to first understand the setting.
Okay.
We're dealing with 2 distinct communities. Dover, a small town where everyone knows everyone, and Russellville, a larger college town with a very different energy.
Yeah, that's right. And this contrast between, small town life and the more anonymous environment of a college town, it really plays a significant role in how this case unfolds.
So let's talk about Nona Dirksmeyer.
Yeah.
She was more than just a, beautiful face, as some headlines might suggest.
Yes.
She was talented,
Yes.
a music student at Arkansas Tech, full of dreams and aspirations. But she also carried a heavy weight from her past.
Yeah, the source material reveals that Nona had endured a traumatic childhood, including sexual abuse by her father.
Yeah.
She struggled with depression and had engaged in self-harm.
This background adds another layer of tragedy to the case and makes you wonder,
Yeah.
did those who knew her miss any signs
Right.
of distress? Was there more that could have been done to help her?
That's a question that lingers throughout this story.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that behind the public persona,
Right.
behind the smiles and achievements, individuals can be battling these private demons.
To understand Nona fully,
Mm-hmm.
we need to understand her relationship with Kevin Jones.
Okay.
They had a long history together,
Mm-hmm.
dating back to kindergarten.
Wow.
They were high school sweethearts, planning a future together.
The source even mentions that they were discussing baby names,
Wow.
but their relationship wasn't without its bumps.
Sure.
There was a brief breakup during their senior year of high school,
Aye.
a period that seems to have deeply affected Nona.
This breakup becomes a focal point later in the investigation.
Yep.
It's interesting, though, that from Kevin's perspective, the breakup was a mistake, something he regretted.
Right.
He saw their reconciliation as a fresh start, a chance to rebuild their relationship.
It's important to consider both perspectives, both sides of the story.
Of course.
Relationships are complex, and what might seem clear-cut from the outside can be quite different when you delve into the nuances and emotions involved.
Now let's fast forward to the night of December 15th, 2005.
Okay.
Kevin and his mother, Janice, are driving to a Christmas party.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin's excited to see Nona, but he's also growing increasingly worried because he hasn't been able to reach her all day.
He tries calling her multiple times.
Right.
Then he calls her mother and stepfather, but no one seems to know where she is.
The worry just escalates as the unanswered calls pile up.
Yeah, you can feel the tension.
As they're driving, Kevin remembers that a friend of his delivers pizzas in Russellville.
Oh, okay.
Desperate for any information, he calls his friend and asks him to check on Nona during his deliveries. It's a long shot.
Yeah.
But at this point, Kevin's grasping at straws.
That sense of urgency, that growing fear, it's palpable in the source material.
Yeah.
You can almost feel the tension rising as the hours pass.
Yeah.
And Nona remains unreachable.
And that tension culminates in a chilling discovery when Kevin, his mother, and the pizza delivery guy arrive at Nona's apartment complex.
Right.
The back door is unlocked, immediately setting off alarm bells.
And what they see through the sliding glass door
I can't even imagine.
is a scene that will forever be etched in their memories.
Oh my gosh.
Nona lying motionless on the floor, the apartment in disarray.
Kevin rushes in frantically trying to revive her,
Yeah.
but it's too late.
The source describes the chaotic scene, the heart-wrenching realization that something terrible has happened.
Right.
The festive mood is replaced by shock and disbelief.
While emergency services are on their way,
Right.
Kevin's mother, Janice, makes a frantic call to 911.
It's a call filled with terror and confusion, capturing the raw emotion of that night.
The source paints a picture of Kevin cradling Nona's body, desperately trying to warm her in the cold apartment.
Yeah.
Clinging to a sliver of hope, even as the reality of the situation sinks in. It's a poignant and heartbreaking image.
It really speaks volumes about the depths of their relationship.
Meanwhile, Detective Mark Frost arrives at the crime scene, ready to begin the meticulous work of piecing together what happened.
He's immediately struck by the chaotic state of the apartment and the chilling details that begin to emerge.
The source material provides a detailed account of those details.
Yeah, like a bloody light bulb, a steak knife, and a used condom wrapper found near the kitchen counter.
Oh my.
Signs of a struggle and Nona's missing phone battery.
That's a lot to process.
It is, even for a seasoned detective.
While Detective Frost carefully documents the scene,
Right.
Kevin is taken to the Russellville police station for questioning.
This marks a significant shift in the narrative.
Yeah.
The atmosphere becomes tense, filled with suspicion.
The interrogation led by Detective David Byrd is characterized by a relentless line of questioning.
Yeah, focusing on Kevin's alibi and a scratch on his forehead.
The source highlights the detective's focus on that scratch, suggesting it could have been inflicted by Nona during a struggle.
Right. It's one of those details that can be interpreted in multiple ways, adding to the ambiguity of the case.
And Kevin does have an explanation for the scratch, saying he bumped his head on a shelf while searching for Nona's missing phone battery.
But his explanation doesn't seem to satisfy the detectives. There's a sense that they're already fixated on him as their primary suspect.
It's interesting to note that Kevin is open about the ups and downs of his relationship with Nona.
He admits to the previous breakup, calling it a dumb mistake.
Right.
He doesn't try to present a picture-perfect romance.
But this honesty, coupled with the emotional turmoil of the night, seems to fuel the detective's suspicions rather than quell them.
The interrogation stretches on for hours, leaving Kevin drained and with a growing sense of unease.
What's fascinating here is how quickly the focus shifted to Kevin.
Even before any formal charges were filed, whispers and rumors began circulating in the community, painting them as the likely culprit.
It's like the classic small-town dynamic at play.
Yeah, news travels fast.
And with Nona's beauty queen status adding to the media frenzy,
Right.
the case quickly becomes a hot topic of conversation.
And unfortunately for Kevin, some of the early evidence, however circumstantial, does seem to point in his direction.
So we end this part of our deep dive with Kevin leaving the police station, exhausted and bewildered by the events of the night.
He and his mother are completely unaware of the storm that's about to engulf their lives.
So we left off with Kevin and his mom leaving the police station, thrust into this whirlwind of suspicion and speculation.
But remember, at this point, no charges had been filed.
Right.
The investigation was still going on, and Detective David Byrd was, meticulously gathering statements, piecing together timelines, really trying to establish a clear sequence of events.
Yeah.
That led to Nona's death.
But with so much ambiguity surrounding the evidence, was there any pushback against focusing solely on Kevin?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, based on the information we have, it seems the investigation, at least initially, remained quite focused on Kevin.
So it was almost like tunnel vision.
Yeah, perhaps it was the weight of those early circumstantial findings, or maybe the pressure of a community, eager for answers. But the exploration of alternative scenarios seemed to take a back seat.
It makes you wonder about the impact of that tunnel vision. Did it hinder the pursuit of other leads?
It's certainly a valid concern.
Or a more comprehensive understanding of what really happened.
And we see this reflected in how the case progressed. Despite the lack of direct evidence linking Kevin to the crime, the prosecution felt confident enough to move forward with charges.
So let's talk about those charges. What was the prosecution's main argument against Kevin? What evidence did they present to support their case?
The prosecution built their case around the idea that Kevin, driven by jealousy and anger over the recent breakup, had both the motive and opportunity to commit the murder.
Okay.
They pointed to the scratch on his forehead, suggesting it was a sign of a violent struggle.
But didn't Kevin offer a plausible explanation for that scratch? He said he hit his head on a shelf while looking for Nona's phone battery.
He did. And that difference in interpretation, that clash of narratives, becomes a recurring theme throughout the trials.
Okay.
The prosecution presented the scratch as incriminating evidence, while the defense argued it was an innocent injury easily explained by Kevin's account of his actions that night.
And what about the steak knife and the used condom wrapper found at the scene? Those items were presented as pretty suggestive.
Absolutely. The prosecution implied that these items pointed to a possible sexual encounter that turned violent.
Right.
They tried to weave this narrative of a jealous rage culminating in a tragic confrontation.
But again, Kevin offered an alternative explanation.
Yes, he maintained that he and Nona hadn't been intimate that day, and that the condom wrapper must have been from a previous occasion.
Okay.
He insisted on his innocence, claiming he had nothing to do with Nona's death.
So we have conflicting interpretations of the physical evidence.
Right.
A whirlwind of rumors and speculations swirling in the community, and a media frenzy amplifying every detail of the case. It sounds like the stage was set for a dramatic trial.
It was. And the first trial, held in 2007, became a focal point for all the tension and uncertainty that had been building.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about legal arguments and forensic evidence. It was about public perception, community dynamics, and the emotional weight of a young life tragically lost.
And let's not forget the impact all of this had on Kevin and his family.
Of course.
They were not only fighting a legal battle, but also facing a barrage of judgment and scrutiny from the public.
It's hard to imagine the pressure and emotional toll that comes with being at the center of such a high-profile case, especially one where the evidence is so ambiguous and open to interpretation.
So with all these factors at play, how did that first trial unfold? What were some of the key arguments presented? And how did the jury respond to the conflicting evidence?
The first trial was a captivating display of legal strategy and forensic analysis. The prosecution, painted a picture of Kevin as a possessive boyfriend enraged by jealousy, using the circumstantial evidence and his own admissions about the rocky relationship to build their narrative.
Okay.
They presented expert witnesses who offered their interpretations of the physical evidence, attempting to solidify their theory of the crime.
And what about the defense? How did they counter the prosecution's claims?
The defense, as you might expect, challenged the prosecution's interpretation of the evidence at every turn. They argued that the physical evidence was circumstantial, open to multiple interpretations, and not strong enough to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
They emphasized the lack of any DNA evidence directly linking Kevin to the crime scene.
It's fascinating how the same piece of evidence, like the scratch on Kevin's forehead, could be used to support two completely different narratives.
Exactly. And that's the inherent challenge with circumstantial evidence. It's like piecing together a puzzle with missing pieces, relying on interpretation and inference to fill the gaps. And in this case, those gaps were significant enough to raise reasonable doubt.
So after weeks of testimony, expert opinions, and emotional pleas from both sides, how did the jury ultimately decide?
The jury deliberated for days, grappling with the weight of the evidence and the conflicting narratives. But ultimately, they couldn't reach a unanimous decision. The first trial ended in a mistrial.
We left off with that dramatic moment, a mistrial. The jury couldn't agree on Kevin's guilt.
Yeah, even with the prosecution's focus on his relationship with Nona.
It's a testament to the complexities of the case that even after weeks of testimony and all that evidence, reasonable doubt lingered in the minds of some jurors.
Yeah, it really does make you think.
So what happens next? Does the prosecution just give up?
Not quite. The state of Arkansas was determined to get a conviction, but instead of simply retrying the same case, the investigation took a surprising turn.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. What changed in the investigation?
Well, a new suspect emerged, a man named Gary Dunn. He lived in the same apartment complex as Nona, and crucially, had a history of violence against women. This wasn't just a random name thrown into the mix.
Hold on. If this Dunn character was a viable suspect with a violent past, why wasn't he considered earlier?
That's a question that has been debated extensively. Some argue that the initial focus on Kevin might have led investigators to overlook or downplay other potential leads.
Right, it's like tunnel vision.
Exactly. It's like they were so convinced of Kevin's guilt that they weren't looking elsewhere.
So how did this new suspect affect the second trial?
The second trial, held in 2008, was a turning point. The defense presented evidence linking Dunn to the crime scene.
What kind of evidence?
Specifically, DNA evidence found on a condom wrapper.
A condom wrapper?
That had been overlooked in the initial investigation.
Wow, so there was DNA evidence connecting someone else to the crime scene?
Yes.
And it wasn't discovered until the second trial?
It was a huge oversight.
It's huge. It really throws the entire case into a new light.
It does. This new evidence, along with the defense's continued arguments about the circumstantial nature of the case against Kevin, had a major impact. The jury was once again hung. Another mistrial.
2 mistrials. You'd think at this point the prosecution might reconsider their approach?
You would think so, right. But they decided to push forward with a third trial in 2010. However, they shifted their strategy.
What did they change?
Instead of relying solely on the physical evidence, they focused more on Kevin's behavior after Nona's death.
Okay.
They presented witnesses who claimed he seemed emotionless, suggesting this was indicative of guilt.
But isn't that a risky strategy? I mean, people react to grief and trauma in different ways.
Exactly. And the defense argued vehemently against this approach, pointing out that Kevin's stoicism could have been a coping mechanism, a way to deal with the shock and disbelief of the situation. But this time, the strategy worked.
You're saying despite the two previous mistrials, the introduction of an alternate suspect with a violent past and the reliance on a behavioral analysis that could be considered subjective, Kevin was found guilty in the third trial.
Yes. In a stunning turn of events, the third trial resulted in a guilty verdict. Kevin Jones was convicted of Nona Dirksmeyer's murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison.
This is a truly perplexing case. With so many layers of doubt, conflicting interpretations, and the presence of another possible perpetrator, how did the jury in the third trial reach a guilty verdict?
We can only speculate about the jury's thought process and what ultimately swayed their decision. Maybe they found the prosecution's revised narrative more convincing, or perhaps the weight of 3 trials and years of speculation finally tipped the scales. Regardless, the outcome is a smug reminder that justice isn't always black and white. Sometimes reasonable doubt remains even after a verdict is reached.
The Nona Dirksmeyer case is a captivating and deeply unsettling example of how difficult it can be to determine truth and achieve justice.
Absolutely.
It raises questions about the reliability of circumstantial evidence, the impact of public pressure on investigations, and the very nature of reasonable doubt.
It also highlights the human element inherent in any legal case. The decisions made by investigators, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and jurors are all influenced by their own perspectives, biases, and interpretations. And in a case like this, where the evidence is so open to interpretation, those human factors can play a significant role in shaping the outcome.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey through a case that gripped a community and exposed the complexities of the legal system.
It really has.
What are your final thoughts on the Nona Dirksmeyer case?
This case serves as a sobering reminder that even in the pursuit of justice, there are no easy answers. It challenges us to consider the weight of circumstantial evidence, the importance of thorough and unbiased investigations, and the lasting impact of these events on everyone involved. It's a story that will stay with you long after the podcast ends, prompting you to think about the delicate balance between seeking justice and grappling with the possibility that the full truth may forever remain elusive.
We hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on this captivating and complex case. Be sure to join us next time as we delve into another intriguing story that will make you question everything you thought you knew.